The topic of this lesson is wage determination in a perfectly competitive labor market. A labor market is a market where labor services are traded, and conditions of services are negotiated. There are two broad categories of labor market, namely perfectly competitive labor market and imperfect labor market. In this lesson, we will be considering only how wages are determined in a perfectly competitive labor market. What is a perfectly competitive labor market? A perfectly competitive labor market is one with the following characteristics. Number 1. There are many firms and many workers. The firms demand for labor services while the workers are individuals that supply their labor services. This is different from what is obtainable in the product market, where the firms are the suppliers of goods while individuals demand for goods. Number 2. Labor is homogeneous. This means that workers have identical skills. In reality, this is not true. A worker's skill is determined by his education, training, and experience. Number 3. The wage rate is the same. All the firms pay the same wage rate. Any firm that decides to pay less than the ruling wage rate will lose their workers to competitors. A worker cannot also ask for a higher wage because there are many workers that are willing to accept the prevailing wage rate. It means that the firms are wage takers. Number 4. There is perfect knowledge about the market. The workers are aware of the available job opportunities and the prevailing wage rate. The firms also know where to get the workers at the existing wage rate. In this market, the wage rate for the firm is determined from where the marginal revenue product and the marginal factor cost are equal. The marginal revenue product, MRP, is the extra revenue made by employing the additional worker. It is the product of the marginal physical product, MPP, and the marginal revenue, MR. The marginal physical product is the number of units of output produced by an extra worker, while marginal revenue is the revenue made from selling an additional unit of the product. For example, an extra worker produces 100 units, and each extra unit is sold for $4. 100 units is MPP, that is what the extra worker produces. The marginal revenue is $4. The marginal revenue product is $400, that is 100 times 4. The marginal revenue product curve slopes upwards first and then slopes downwards. Initially, an additional worker will produce more and bring in more revenue for the business. But it will get to a stage when every extra worker starts producing less than the previous worker, due to the law of diminishing returns. Therefore, the revenue made from the extra worker also starts to fall. The law of diminishing returns states that as a business continues to increase the quantity of one factor of production, for example labor, while keeping the quantity of the other factor fixed, for example capital, the marginal product will increase initially and then it will start to decrease. The marginal product is an additional output that arises from an increase in input, for example labor, by one more unit. The marginal factor cost is the cost of employing an additional or extra worker. It is fixed since the firm cannot influence the wage rate in this market. Everyone earns the same wage rate. Therefore, it is a horizontal line. In a perfectly competitive labor market, the wage rate is determined by the intersection of marginal revenue product and marginal factor cost. That is where they are equal. The marginal revenue product is the demand curve for the firm, while the marginal factor cost is the same as the average factor cost. The marginal factor cost is the supply of labor curve. On the graph, the profit-maximizing firm employs QE workers and pays a wage rate of WE. QE and WE are traced from where marginal revenue product and marginal factor cost are equal. For the industry, the wage rate is determined from where the demand for labor and the supply of labor are equal. The demand for labor is downward sloping like a normal demand curve. No individual firm's action can change the shape of the demand curve for the industry, because there are so many of them. The supply of labor curve for the industry is upward sloping like a normal supply curve. Demand for labor is the amount of workers firms are willing and able to employ at a given wage rate. Supply of labor is the amount of workers that are willing and able to offer their services at a given wage rate. The wage rate is WE while the quantity of worker employed is QE in the diagram.